Hello, everybody, and welcome back into another Hockey Writers Playoff 2022 playoff preview show here. This one is on the Tampa Bay Lightning versus the Toronto Maple Leafs, which just got finalized last night. I've got two writers, Peter Baracchini, who's, of course, the Toronto Maple Leafs writer, prospects. Oh, you see him a lot on these shows. So thanks, Peter, for coming on. And I also got Eugene Helfrick. He covers the Tampa Bay Lightning and a bunch of other, he does a bunch of other at-large NHL pieces as well. Thanks, Eugene, for coming on the show too.
Anytime.
Absolutely.
All right. So yeah, we're here to preview this series, which I think is going to be really exciting. The Maple Leafs and Lightning are ridiculously high-powered offensive teams. They got stars. They've got pretty good goaltending. So we're going to go through each category and kind of see how they match up. Just as a bit of a primer, the season series was 2-2. The Lightning kind of had a bit, they got an OT loss in there, or a big shootout loss, one of those in there. But 2-2 is series. Lightning outscored the Maple Leafs 16-12. It wasn't a massive. I think that 8-1 kind of boosted that stock a bit, that last game. But so then power plays were even at 4 for 11 each side. So, there was no real advantage there. So let's start with a key matchup here. Like I said, they got superstars, Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews. Austin Matthews is a 60-goal scorer. You got the Lightning with Steven Stamkos, Nikita Kucherov. It's their headliners. We'll do it to you, Eugene. What do you think about this matchup? Do you think there's an edge to be had here, or is it just going to be a crazy just back and forth with these two superstar duos?
What is one of the things on paper throughout the season, the Toronto Maple Leafs were technically the better team on paper. They had better stats all around, outside of a few defensive things and maybe goaltender. We look at something like the Matthews Marner versus Stamkos Kucherov. It's a very different sort of players, because obviously Matthews is probably the best player in the world right now, barring Connor McDavid, depending if you count goal scoring or assists more. That's a whole nother debate. And then Marner hasn't had it wasn't 100-point season, but I think he had 97. I think he was right on the cusp there.
Yeah.
But then you have Stamkos, who had technically his best career year. He had 100 points, 40 goals, which he had never done before. Yeah, Kucherov, who's coming off injury, and since coming off being injured, he has had, I think, like 5 or 6 straight multi-point games. And Stamkos just set the Lightning team record with 9 straight multi-point games. So they're coming off on a heater, where Matthews and Marner have to have some games off. Matthews has some injuries. So we're not really sure if they're going to be at 100% or if they're running at 90 or 80, because 90% of Matthews is better than most players, but 90% of Matthews is better than 100% of Stamkos. Right now, you can argue it yes or no, because last time Matthews played this Lightning, he put up a hat trick and made us look bad. So it is one of the things where the Lightning, on paper, I don't think the Lightning, I think the Maple Leafs duo is better on paper, but if they're at 100%, and we don't know if they're at 100% right now.
Well, that's the thing. There's even Austin Matthews, he was kept out of the game a couple games there. At the end, I don't know if it was precautionary for an injury or just load management, like we've talked about on Maple Leafs Lounge a bit. Peter, will go Austin Matthews. Do you think he's going to be the big factor in this series? Like I said, 60-goal scorer. He had 7 points in the season series. Marner had 5. Do you think Matthews is going to be the key driver of this offense? Or is this going to be some kind of thing like a collective effort against this high-powered Stanley Cup champion, double Stanley Cup, back to back?
Well, when you have a 60-goal scorer like Matthews, obviously the main thing is, you expect him to carry the heavy load, with his shots at 5-on-5, the power play production, although most of his goals have come at 5-on-5. And, you could always make the case that, in 2020-21, where he only had 1 goal and 4 assists in 5 games against the Montreal Canadiens in that series, you could argue that, he didn't have anything going for him. He had quite a number of shots, 35. Just, he ran into a stalwart in Carey Price. Hopefully, the mentality and the way that this team thinks nowadays, a new rejuvenated Mitch Marner, a goal scoring Mitch Marner, I think those two are going to be leading the charge, definitely. And both offenses for Tampa Bay and Toronto match up evenly. Especially the top 6. The top 6 are lethal on both sides. For me, I think it's going to come down to how much of the impact is going to come from the bottom 6 forwards and the depth forwards, the 3rd and 4th lines. Looking at the numbers, and I hope I am right with this. When I was counting for the Tampa Bay Lightning, they had four players in their bottom six that hit double digits. One of them being Ross Colton, who hit the 20 goal mark. And that's great. That's great. It absolutely is, because you need that kind of production, especially with the players lost in Blake Coleman, Yanni Gordon, and Barclay Goodrow, because they were basically the go-to line for them last year, or basically the last 2 seasons, because they were always the ones that try and provide the spark and energy. The Maple Leafs this season have 6 players in their bottom 6, or players that have moved up into the top, but like can still play that middle 6 role. You have about 6 players that have hit double digits. So you have players like Ilya Mikheyev, Pierre Engvall, Andre Kasha. The hope is that he's going to be ready for game 1. David Camp all hit double digits and, set career highs for most of them. So I think if there's anything to look at, it's going to be how the bottom 6 is going to play out for both teams. Who's going to come out on top? Because that to me is going to be really important. We know how great the top 6 are for both sides. Yeah. For me, that's going to be the main factor. If Toronto's bottom 6 can, provide the speed, the energy, and counteract the physicality that comes from the Tampa Bay's bottom 6, I think you have a case that maybe edge Toronto, but then again, still forwards is still evenly matched no matter how you look at it.
Yeah. Before we move to the defense, Eugene, we mentioned the bottom 6. I mean, the last 2 Stanley Cup runs have been driven a lot, of course, by Nikita Kucherov, but also driven by their third line, who is gone. I mean, they're not there anymore. They've replaced kind of a bit with Corey Perry. He's been pretty good all season. Do you think that's going to be a huge thing in this series, that they don't have this line to drive, be that extra factor that they just won't have this year?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why Brisebois spent so much on the trade deadline to bring in players like Hagel and Nick Paul. Yeah. Because you could see he kind of wanted to try and recreate some of the magic of a third line that's fast, along with, like you mentioned, Ross Colton, who'd scored 20 goals this season. That's fast, defensive, hard to play against, can do breakouts, and can lay down hits, score some good goals, and score those key goals, and also play on the penalty kill, which is what Gord, Coleman, and Goudreau did so well the last 2 seasons. And it's going to come down to those 3 players. We know what we're going to get from our fourth line of Pat Maroon, Corey Perry, and Bellemare. Because those guys are going to, older guys, they aren't necessarily fastest. They can score some goals. They had a really good goal differential throughout the season for players who didn't play a lot. They managed to keep a lot of it out of their end in the opposing end, despite being defensive. They're going to be the agitate. Corey Perry's going to start a fight. Maroon's going to start a fight. And we know where it came from them. It's going to come down to being that third line of Paul, Hagel, and Colton, and whether or not they can break through and chip in a few goals. If they can, that'll definitely put the Lightning in the right direction again. If they aren't able to create that magic like we had with Coleman, Goudreau, and Gord last 2 seasons, it's going to be a lot harder to win just based on your top 6 scoring alone.
Well, yeah, I mean, that line is actually pretty good. I mean, Hagel, he's been really good since coming over, and he was really good in Chicago. So I think, and he wasn't just a rental. Like he's now part of the team for the next few years. So
yeah, he's a core player now.
We'll see. Yeah, that's right. So we'll see how that all plays out in the playoffs, and it's gonna be fun to watch. Let's move to the defense. I mean, again, they got some. I think the Lightning probably have the edge here, but I'll ask you, Eugene. Do you think the Lightning have the edge in defense? I mean, they got a superstar in Victor Hedman. Their defense is just ridiculous. Sergachev. They really haven't changed. Cernak. I mean, their names just go down. Do you think overall their defense core is better than the Maple Leafs?
At the very least, we can confidently say the defense core is more seasoned as a group. The entire top 5 has played through 2 Stanley Cup runs together now. Even their weakest player would be Jan Ruda, and he's still done a lot better than people give him credit for. And he, on most teams, wouldn't be playing on a top line row with Victor Hedman, but in that top pairing role, he's done very well for himself, if not well exceed expectations. You can make an argument that the 6th player with Bogosian, if he can stay healthy, that's going to be a big if there. Because if he goes down, then you have Cal Foote, who's only in his 2nd season, and he's looking better as play goes along, but he's still pretty young. But overall, I would say there's a reason why they've won. There's a reason why Brisebois protected all of his defensemen going into the expansion draft. He didn't want to lose any of them. There's a reason why, because that top 4 is brutal. Hedman, Cernak, Sergachev, and McDonough is one of the best top 4s going.
Yeah.
So I said overall, I think they have the better defense. I know Toronto has a lot more depth with Giordano and Lyubushkin now. There's a lot different. They've not played together that long yet, but in the games they have played, they've looked pretty solid. And that's one, if they go out and they can kind of set the tone early on against the Lightning and say, hey, we can keep up with your guys' hit for hit, point for point, and that's going to go a long ways for them to actually get them over the top compared to what the Lightning's going to bring each night.
Yeah, I mean, Peter, just quickly here, the defense has been a question mark. We've talked about it on Maple Leafs Lounge a few times. Is this going to be something that's going to be an issue in this series, especially against, a defense like that and the forwards that they got? Is that going to be something that we're going to look back on and say why they didn't get out of this first round again?
That's interesting question, because we thought about how a few weeks ago when they thrashed the Lightning 6-2 with that Austin Matthews hat trick, that was the best the Maple Leafs have been, and they shut down the high flying offense that the Lightning do have. And then you fast forward to about a week and a half later, where it was the reverse. Toronto was on the receiving end of an onslaught from the Tampa Bay Lightning. So to me, yeah, I do agree with Eugene that Tampa Bay does have the more seasoned and veteran defense core based on what they have. And when you have an elite Norris Trophy caliber defenseman and Victor Hedman, obviously you're going to vault over the competition. But I think now with the additions that the Maple Leafs made and bringing in Lyubushkin and Giordano, you have that depth, you have that stability, and that you can insert players and move them up and down the lineup and give. And the main important thing through all of this is it gives Sheldon Keefe options. And that was the main thing that Kyle Dubas wanted to do. We've seen Lyubushkin play on the top pairing with Morgan Rielly. At times he looks good. At times, he can't get caught with his clearing attempts. He does look a bit flat-footed because the skating is a bit of an issue with his stop and goes. You have Jake Muzzin coming back. Is he going to be healthy on the back end? We saw in his last game that he was throwing the body a little bit more against the Bruins. Can he do that against the Lightning? That's the physicality is going to amp up. They're going to rely on Muzzin, and Giordano and Liljegren have been a very, very consistent and very strong pairing for the Maple Leafs as a third pair. And, unfortunately, Rasmus Sandin may be the odd player out as good as he's been this season. But when you bring in a depth player like Giordano and he looks confident with Liljegren, that can play a factor, and that could be the pivotal changing point for the Maple Leafs on the fence. And if not, you have the ability to go to a Giordano Brody pairing, as we saw with them in Calgary. You can put, Lyubushkin with Muzzin. You can put Brody back up with Rielly, as they have been for most of the season. So you have options. Again, the consistency, and it's just about playing simple defense, not getting too carried away, not getting too overly aggressive, not getting caught on the pinches, odd man rushes, because that's what's killed this team at times during the season. They're able to control that, work on their breakouts. Because even in that game against the Lightning, they lost. They looked very lost in terms of their clearing attempts and transitional play, which are very strong in. They're able to come together and have that defense transition to offense and have that balancing act. Again, obviously the edge is the Lightning, but that shouldn't be counted out for the Maple Leafs.
Oh, great points. Let's move to the last part of this, is the goaltending. Again, Vasilevskiy's been through this so much. I mean, he's won 2 cups. He's also been a big factor in both those wins. While the Maple Leafs, Jack Campbell, and he was really good last playoffs. I mean, you can't fault him for why they went out in that first round again. What's this goaltending matchup look like? Eugene, I mean, all about Vasilevskiy and what he's done. He's played a lot of hockey, though, in this past 2 seasons. In a bit. Do you think that's going to be a factor as a fatigue? He's going to play all the games. They're not going to use their backup. I'm not sure. I'm sure they won't.
Yeah, it's going to come down to, I said, he's played so many games the last 2 years. Plus, the last time he played a full 82-game season was when they got swept by the Blue Jackets. Now, that could be totally unrelated, but it could also be a thing where maybe that extra use, those extra 20, 30 games in the regular season wore on him more. You start seeing him by about game, let's say, 55 to 60 range, he started looking off a little bit. So they started playing Elliott more, giving him some more rest. And he started looking a little sharper by the end. But he hasn't looked like, the Vasi that won 4 straight, 4 straight shutouts and game winning on the playoffs, all the ridiculous stuff he did last season. He hasn't looked like that yet, but he also didn't look like that going into last year's playoff.
Yep. Yeah.
And then he turned it on. So the question is he actually wore out? Is he just kind of playing slow right now? Because he knows he didn't have to really try since January, because all the playoff teams were pretty much locked in by January in the East. And that's going to be one of the questions, because like I said, ultimately he's going to be starting every game, or at least he's going to be winning every game. If they're putting Elliott in there, it's a game they're assuming they're going to lose. Elliott's played well, but he's not someone you turn to and expect to win, a series on. So yeah, it's gonna be Vasi all the way, and if he is playing like we think he can, it's gonna be hard for anybody to beat him. But if he's off even a little bit, all of a sudden that opens the door wide open for another team.
Yeah. Moving over to Jack Campbell, Peter. I mean, he's going to be the starter. I'm you're hoping that he will be throughout this playoffs. You think he has the ability to out goaltend Vasilevskiy, who's won 2 cups here, and Vezina.
I'm going to go back to the first time they met in that 2-1 overtime win for Toronto. It was a goaltending duel between him and Vasilevskiy. I mean, it was a very tight game in terms of, shot attempts. The goalies were on point with everything. And, ultimately it was William Nylander that scored in overtime. But I mean, we talked about it at the beginning of the season. If Jack Campbell can translate or replicate and carry over the success that he had in the regular season last season to this one, it looked like it was going to happen. But then again, the inconsistency started to happen, the dive into play, the rib injury. But since he came back, he's been looking at, for the month of April, he's has 7 wins, a 2.59 goals against average, and a 915 save percentage for that month alone. That is his second best save percentage of the season compared to the 959 he had in November. So if they're able to get that, mid 915, 920 save percentage, try to minimize the goals against per game, get to the have the Jack Campbell that was all-star caliber in October, November, and for the early part of December. Yeah, I do think that he can find the mindset to try and not necessarily dethrone Vasilevskiy, because you can't dethrone him as the best goalie. It's insane to say that, but he can be a difference maker and make that timely save and try and outplay him like he did in that game early on. And obviously that blowout loss to in the 8-1, they kept Shalgren in there because they didn't want to throw Jack Campbell in there. 1, load management, 2, keep him ready for the next game, because they had a plan. They wanted to balance out the starts for both players. So obviously he's going to be relied on. He's going to be the pillar in that. He's going to be the one to go head to head against Vasilevskiy. He was able to do that once before. Again, it was only 1 game. Can he do that again? And the more important thing is, can he stay healthy? We saw, again, the rib injury. He tried to play through it, affected him. Shalgren came in. He looked great. But then again, throwing the rookie into a playoff series, you're gambling right there. Peter Mrazek still recovering from injury, so you're going to have to rely on him. And if not, then Shalgren is going to be the one to take over. Yep. But Campbell is going to be the starter. He's going to be the one to rely on. The team has faith. Well, everyone has faith in everyone on that team. But if he's able to get back to where he was early on in the season, I have no problems to say that, Jack Campbell can get this thing locked up for the Maple Leafs.
Yeah, this is another interesting matchup that's going to be going through the whole series. Let's finish this off with some X factors. There's always those guys that you don't expect to do stuff in the playoffs. Like I always go back to Fernando Pisani way back when, 14 goals in the playoffs, and he only scored like 8 or something in the regular season. Michael Pekka was another guy that just insane in the playoffs. Regular season, not so much, but these guys are always key. And, the Lightning know that all too well, of guys that are not expected, but they're big factors. Eugene, you have an X factor on this team that could potentially do that.
One to keep an eye on with the Lightning is Alex Killorn. He's been with the team forever. He really knows how to play. He scored 20 goals this season again. He's kind of underrated on the team. There's so many stars. He's a player that will chip in 3 or 4 key goals. He was scoring an overtime goal. He's one of the players that you turn to when you need something done, because he finds a way to get it done. So he's one to always keep an eye on Alex Killorn.
Yeah, good pick. Peter, an X factor for the Maple Leafs that could potentially turn the tide and not be expected to.
I'm going to go with 2, and I'm going to tie them all together because they're basically on the same line as Ilya Mikheyev, Pierre Engvall, and even I'll throw in David Kampf, because that third line has been a pillar for the Maple Leafs all season, and especially the fact that all 3 are on the penalty kill, and they can do some damage on when they're down a man because of their transitional play. And both of them have speed. Both of them have a good shot. Ilya Mikheyev has worked on his hands to get in tight and make moves on the goalie. So I think that, with them in the fold on the third line, penalty kill situation, look out for them, because they can do a lot of work and make the opponent pay in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, they could potentially be that Coleman line for the Maple Leafs. Who knows? Let's finish it with Eugene. We'll start with you. The Lightning will win this series
If they stay out of the penalty box, the Lightning are the second most penalized team in the league, and the Maple Leafs have the best power play in the league. So if they can be a little cleaner, stay out of the box, they have a much better chance of winning.
I could probably say that about the Maple Leafs too. Don't do that. I don't think you want to give the Lightning too many chances either. Peter, the Maple Leafs will win this series and get out of the first round for the first time in a long time.
I will say that if they use their past failures to their advantage, I say this all the time with the Maple Leafs, try and use the failures of the first round as exits, especially last season where you saw Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews alone in the locker room, head down, just very dejected after that first round loss. With this newfound mentality, I think if they're able to have that attitude, that collective group, that everyone is there for each other, power through and prove everyone wrong that last year was a fluke, and this core means business. If they're able to do that, then they can power through each game and ultimately win the series.
Yeah, good points there, both of you. So now, final predictions. We're going to go back to this and see who was right and how close you guys are. Eugene, what is this series going to end up as? Games and a game-winning goal. Who's going to win this series?
Ooh, I like that. It's hard to imagine this being a short series. I would say if I'm being optimistic, Lightning in 6, scored by Point, because he seems to be the guy who scores everything when you need the last.
There you go.
I'll go with
that.
About
Braden Point, yeah.
Yeah, I can't forget Points. So
yeah, he does stuff. He scores goals too, and he's probably one of the best defensively two-way guys on there too. Peter, what's final prediction and who will win the series? Have the series winning goal?
Hopefully, I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to be very optimistic that in Game 7, Toronto will win it. And I believe that the game-winning goal is going to come off the stick of William Nylander.
Good. We'll see. We'll see. That's good. Like I said on the Oilers show, it's going to be a weird one. I mean, you'll have like a fourth line guy or defensive defenseman or something weird happen.
Yeah.
Score. It's okay. The series winner. But I mean, stars do it too. I mean, we've seen it in the past. So there's your final predictions. That's just the preview of this series. Thanks, Eugene and Peter, for coming on and setting up this series, which will start either Monday or Tuesday. So it's going to come really quick. So thanks for joining us for another series preview, and make sure you're following Hockey Writers for all the coverage on this series. Eugene and Peter will be writing about it, I'm sure. So definitely follow Lightning Writers and the Maple Leafs writers on the site. They will be covering this series extensively. And of course, follow us on Twitter and our YouTube channel, which we'll be getting more of these previews out in the next day or so. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.